Hungary, under Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, is embarking on a bold and controversial new path, pivoting away from its traditional Western allies in the European Union and NATO. For decades, Hungary was seen as a committed member of the Western alliance, but recent years have seen a dramatic shift in its foreign policy priorities. Instead of relying solely on the West, Orbán is forging closer ties with China and the BRICS bloc, seeking new economic opportunities and political partnerships that challenge the established order. This strategic realignment challenges the post-Cold War consensus, which saw former Eastern Bloc countries like Hungary integrating into the Western framework, both politically and economically. Now Hungary is questioning whether that integration still serves its national interests. Orbán's so-called Eastern opening policy is rooted in the belief that Western dominance is waning, and that Hungary's future prosperity and survival depend on pragmatic engagement with rising powers. He argues that clinging to old alliances could leave Hungary vulnerable in a rapidly changing world. This move has sparked concern and even alarm in Brussels, Berlin, and Washington, where leaders worry that Hungary's actions could undermine European unity and weaken the transatlantic alliance at a critical time. By positioning itself as a bridge between East and West, Hungary hopes to attract investment, diversify its economy, and gain leverage on the world stage. However, this approach also carries significant risks, including the possibility of political isolation and strained relations with its closest neighbors. Orbán has made it clear that he prioritizes national sovereignty and transactional relationships over shared values or ideological alignment. For him, the ability to make independent decisions is more important than following the consensus of larger blocs. This strategy reflects his vision of a multipolar world, where nations must be opportunistic and flexible, adapting to shifting global power dynamics rather than relying on old certainties. The outcome of Hungary's chosen path will have far-reaching consequences, not only for its own people, but for European politics and the future of the EU as a whole. Other countries are watching closely, wondering if Hungary's experiment will inspire similar moves elsewhere. Whether this bold gamble leads to renewed prosperity and influence, or instead results in economic and political isolation, remains one of the most pressing questions facing Hungary today. Hungary's bold experiment in realpolitik will not only shape its own destiny, but could also redefine the European project for years to come. As the world watches, the stakes are high. Only time will tell if Orbán's gamble will pay off, or if Hungary will find itself charting a lonely course in an uncertain world. Hungary's gradual shift away from the European mainstream is rooted in a decade-long standoff with the European Union, a conflict that has shaped both Hungary's domestic politics and its international reputation. This tension has become one of the defining features of modern Hungarian politics, influencing everything from policy decisions to the country's alliances abroad. The standoff began in earnest with Viktor Orbán's sweeping constitutional changes in 2010, which consolidated power and redefined Hungary's political landscape. These reforms were seen by many as a turning point, setting Hungary on a path that diverged sharply from EU norms. In response, Brussels voiced growing concerns about the erosion of democratic checks and balances, increased government control over the media, and electoral reforms that critics argue unfairly benefit Orbán's Fidesz party. These issues have sparked protests and drawn international scrutiny, highlighting the widening gap between Budapest and Brussels. The 2015 migrant crisis brought these tensions to a head. Hungary's decision to build border fences and reject EU-mandated asylum quotas marked a dramatic escalation, positioning the country as a vocal opponent of Brussels' migration policies. Orbán framed his government's actions as a defense of Hungary's national sovereignty and Christian heritage, presenting himself as a bulwark against what he described as unwanted outside influence. This narrative resonated with many Hungarians, but deepened ideological rifts with EU leaders. In retaliation, the EU has used its financial leverage, withholding billions in funds, until Hungary implements judicial and anti-corruption reforms. These measures are intended to safeguard EU values, but have also fueled accusations of double standards and political interference. Orbán, in turn, denounces these moves as political blackmail, using the standoff to rally domestic support and portray Brussels as an overreaching bureaucracy intent on undermining Hungarian independence. At its core, the conflict is about more than just policy. It's a fundamental disagreement over the future of Europe itself. Orbán champions a vision of a Europe made up of strong, sovereign nations, while Brussels pushes for deeper integration and shared values. This philosophical divide has led Hungary to seek new alliances, turning to countries like China and Russia for investment and diplomatic support, further complicating its relationship with the West. Hungary's defiant stance now poses a significant challenge to the EU's unity and its ability to respond collectively to global crises, raising questions about the future direction of the bloc. As the standoff continues, the EU faces a delicate balancing act, finding ways to engage with Hungary without undermining its own principles or risking a deeper fracture within the European project. Hungary's foreign policy is deeply shaped by its reliance on Russian energy, a relationship that has only grown more significant over the years. This dependence is not just a matter of choice, but a result of Hungary's unique position in Central Europe, where geography and decades-old infrastructure have tied the country's energy grid to Russian supplies. The legacy of Soviet-era pipelines and energy routes means that alternatives are limited and costly, making Russia an unavoidable partner for Hungary's energy needs. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has made energy security a cornerstone of his government's policy, often justifying Hungary's resistance to EU sanctions on Russia by pointing to the country's vulnerability. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Hungary negotiated special exemptions from EU energy sanctions, arguing that a sudden cutoff from Russian oil and gas would devastate its economy and threaten the livelihoods of millions. Orbán frames these decisions as putting Hungarian families first, emphasizing that protecting citizens from skyrocketing energy prices is a patriotic duty, not just a political calculation. Hungary is also pressing ahead with major joint projects with Russia, such as the Pax-Secund nuclear power plant, which is seen as vital for the country's long-term energy independence and sovereignty. Despite mounting geopolitical tensions and pressure from the West, Hungary's economic ties with Russia remain robust, with both countries continuing to sign new trade agreements and deepen cooperation. Orbán often argues that the European Union's push to sever ties with Moscow is driven by ideology rather than practical economic concerns, and insists that Hungary must put its own interests first. As a result, Hungary continues to import Russian oil and gas, ensuring a steady flow of energy that supports its economy and shields its people from the worst effects of global price shocks. While this approach often puts Hungary at odds with its EU partners, it underscores the government's determination to prioritize national stability and the well-being of its citizens above all else. As Hungary's EU relations sour, its embrace of China grows strategic. Orbán positions Hungary as China's reliable EU partner, attracting investments in infrastructure and technology. The Budapest-Belgrade Railway, part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, symbolizes this partnership. Critics raise concerns about transparency and debt, but Hungary sees it as vital for growth. Hungary welcomes Chinese tech investments, defying US and EU security warnings. Budapest's diplomatic loyalty to China disrupts EU consensus on human rights. Hungary's strategic choice aims for economic dividends from its Chinese alliance. Hungary's clash with the EU is a battle of societal visions, the Hungarian model versus the Brussels model. The Hungarian model champions national sovereignty, traditional values, and a strong state. Orbán rejects multiculturalism, prioritizing the nation-state and Christian heritage. He contrasts this with the Brussels model, which he sees as diluting sovereignty and promoting progressive policies. Orbán's economic policy combines low taxes with strategic state intervention, opposing the EU's regulated market. He presents his model as a template for disillusioned European nations. Orbán's vision challenges the EU's direction, promoting an illiberal democracy as an alternative. This conflict is a struggle for Europe's future direction. Hungary's pivot to the east strains EU unity, acting as an internal disruptor. Budapest's veto power derails collective EU actions, weakening its global credibility. Hungary's obstructionism frustrates major EU powers, sparking debates on decision-making reforms. Brussels faces a dilemma: how to handle a member state undermining its interests. Orbán proposes a multi-tiered Europe, challenging the EU's foundational principles. Hungary's stance forces the EU to confront questions about its future and unity. Hungary's relationship with the EU is complex, balancing confrontation with pragmatism. Orbán engages with EU initiatives when beneficial, acting as both dissident and participant. Hungary joins EU defense projects for funding and technology, prioritizing national interest. Despite Eurosceptic rhetoric, Hungary's economy remains integrated with the EU. Hungary negotiates compromises to unlock EU funds, revealing dependency on the bloc. Orbán's strategy reshapes the EU from within, challenging central institutions. Hungary remains a central challenge for European integration. This calculated dissidence ensures Hungary's enduring role in EU politics. Orbán believes Western dominance is over, and a multipolar world is emerging. Hungary aims to be a bridge between East and West, building relationships with major players. Orbán envisions Hungary as an intermediary for capital, technology, and diplomacy. This strategy carries risks, potentially isolating Hungary if the Western order proves resilient. Hungary's future hinges on Orbán's global predictions. Will China's rise continue, or is the transatlantic alliance enduring? The outcome will determine Orbán's legacy as a visionary or a reckless gambler. Hungary's path will shape its prosperity and influence in a changing world.